The Shah's regime was replaced by Khomeini and his followers in February 1979, while the secular forces were weak and dispersed.
دولت اون آدم، مجلس اون آدم، تمام اینها غیر قانونی است و اگر ادامه به این بدن اینها مجرمند و باید محاکمه بشن و ما اونها را محاکمه میکنیم. من دولت تعیین میکنم، من تو دهن این دولت میزنم.
Extreme and violent attacks preceded Khomeini's official ascent to power with the deliberate burning of Rex Cinema in Abadan, which was soon followed by vicious killings of the ex-regime figures. Supporters of Khomeini burned more than 377 people in Cinema Rex and blamed it on Shah's regime. The true face of Khomeini's Islamic Republic was shown from early on with the summary trials carried out by non-judicial henchmen of Khomeini's. Nearly all of the Pahlavi regime's top military brass who had voluntarily surrendered were executed without due process or mercy.
But you have to remember that this is a revolution. This is not a Madison Avenue show that you wanted to, this is a revolution. What do you expect from the revolution?
How long is the revolution going to go on for, Dr. Yazdi? How long is this kind of revolution going to go on for, and how long will it be before you get some kind of order in your affairs?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long. You know you have been witnessing the crimes of the Nazis in Germany, and you didn't denounce the way that they executed those criminals. No, I don't know why you're so much concerned about a bunch of criminals here that they are putting the trial.
So you find it quite acceptable that this kind of retribution is being taken now?
Well, I'm telling you, they deserve, because they have committed crimes. Whether they have to be killed with 10 bullets, I would make your recommendation to them that they should be killed with 12, not 12 bullets, probably with 2 bullets in their head. I will hire some sharpshooters, probably from England or from America, to make 1 bullet in their head.
The height of such brutality was the execution of former Prime Minister Amir Abbas Hoveyda, who had voluntarily surrendered and was shot from behind at a makeshift Islamic court.
من تعجب میکنم ایشان صحبت از اربابان من کردن و منظورشون در موقع ادای این کلمه اربابان امریکایی‌ها بود. اگر امریکایی‌ها اربابان من بودن، جناب آقای رئیس، بنده اینجا چیکار میکردم الان؟ بنده اینجا خدمتتون نبودم. جناب آقای رئیس، بین تمام نخست وزیرانی که قبل از من بودن و بعد از من بودن، کدامشون اینجا تهرانه؟
Concurrent with the execution of ex-regime elements, Khomeini and his followers wasted no time in curbing women's rights and imposing mandatory veiling.
Nous, les femmes, nous avons eu des martyrs comme les hommes. Nous avons lutté avec le voile et sans voile pour notre liberté et pour celle du peuple. Et si Khomeini continue ainsi, moi qui suis une vraie musulmane, je quitterai ma religion.
Qu'est-ce que c'est un chador pour une femme? Oui, ce que ça... Oui, comment ça les entrave, enfin, quel genre de vêtements
c'est? Il y a des années que je mets le tchador. Le tchador m'empêche de bouger, de travailler, de tenir mon enfant par la main. Mais je ne suis pas venue à la manifestation pour ne plus mettre le tchador. J'ai 6 filles et je suis venue pour que mes filles ne soient pas obligées de mettre le tchador, pour que les hommes ne l'obligent pas à le mettre. Je suis venue ici pour défendre mes filles contre le tchador.
Moreover, religious and ethnic minorities were also targeted by Khomeini and his supporters. Among these were the killings of Jewish industrialist Habib Ilghanian and 9 Baha'i community leaders. Ethnic minorities such as Kurds and Turkmen were among those slaughtered in 1979. Kurds such as Ahsan Nahid were executed by Khomeini's notorious hanging judge Khalkhali. Iran's neighbors were not immune from the violent force of Khomeiniism either.
آقای صدام حسین در همون روزهای اول پیروزی انقلاب نوه مرحوم آصف‌الحسن رو، آقا موسی اصفهانی رو به ایران فرستاد. عذرخواهی و آماده همکاری هستیم و آقای خمینی به او جواب داد که نه و گفت که این رژیم 6 ماه بیشتر دوام نمیاره و ما به این رژیم مشروعیت نمیدیم.
ما محمد رضا را بیرون کردیم و شما هم باید این شخص را بیرون بکنید از عراق.
ستاد ارتش، اداره اطلاعات ستاد ارتش که عوامل داشت در خاک عراق، گزارش دقیقی از تمرکز قوای عراق فراهم کرد و این گزارش رو به من داد. ذیل او نوشتم به اطلاع آقای خمینی برسونن. رئیس ستاد و رئیس اطلاعات ارتش رفتن پیش او و گزارش رو دادن. بعد که من او رو دیدم و گفتم خب حالا چه میفرمایید، گفتن که دروغ، اینا هیچ کس به ایران حمله نخواهد کرد. این نظامی ها این حرفا رو میسازن برای اینکه پای آخوند رو از ارتش کوتاه کنن.
آغاز جنگ با عراق رو حدس می‌زدید؟
بله.
چطور؟
در اسفند ماه،
اسفند 57
من مسئول شورای امنیت ملی بودم در دولت بازرگان، معاون نخست وزیر در امور انقلاب و مسئول شورای امنیت ملی. من در اونجا مطرح کردم که بعد از پیروزی انقلاب در کشورهای زیادی یک دولت به اون کشور حمله کرده. آیا چه کشوری این پتانسیل و ظرفیت رو داره که به ایران حمله کنه جز عراق؟ یکی گفتم ترکیه خیر، پاکستان خیر، افغانستان خیر، روسیه خیر. تنها کشوری که واجد اون شرایط بود که به ایران حمله کنه عراق بود. بنابراین از همون اسفند ما معتقد بودیم که، من بارها اینو گفتم و نوشتم، حمله عراق به ایران قابل پیش بینی و قابل پیشگیری بود.
Legally speaking, Saddam Hussein was the aggressor against Iran, but it was Khomeini who provoked Saddam by weakening Iran's diplomatic and defense corps, and by using the language of exporting the revolution to the rest of the region. Khomeini's insatiable thirst for more bloodshed carried on to the violent takeover of the American embassy in Tehran and the ensuing hostage crisis. The devastation brought on by Khomeini resulted in over 1 million casualties on both sides of the war, most graphically exemplified in the use of child soldiers and mine clearers under the cover of besieged forces. Tens of thousands of children were dispatched to minefields and were murdered to further Khomeini's agenda. The speed and scale of these crimes caused great dissatisfaction and opposition among Iranian intellectuals and dissidents. The Islamic regime cracked down on dissidents by imposing new restrictions as part of its cultural revolution. These involved mass purges of academics, students, and administrators from universities, and even further killings. As the war and hostage crisis intensified, Khomeini expanded his oppressive measures and censorship.
ما مردم انقلابی نبودیم. اگر ما انقلابی بودیم اجازه نمیدادیم اینها اظهار وجود کنند. تمام احزاب را ممنوع اعلام میکردیم. تمام جبهه ها را ممنوع اعلام میکردیم. یک حزب و اون حزب الله، حزب مستضعفین.
These policies eventually resulted in the banning of the National Front and ousting of the interim president Bani Sadr. During demonstrations against such actions, armed militias of the regime opened fire to thousands of people and killed many, arrested some, and executed them the same night. The names and identities of many young Iranians murdered on this day have yet to be officially released by the regime. Many Iranians, and especially Baha'is, were targeted and killed on this day as well.
البهایی و ما ادراک ما البهایی. بهایی کنار علی المنار روشن شده که این گروه جاسوس یا فرقه جاسوس که برای سازمان‌های استعماری اینها جاسوسی می‌کنند و خسارتی که این فرقه ضاله مضله از نظر اقتصاد به این مملکت ما وارد آوردند. الله اکبر.
During the period of 1981 to 1988, thousands of dissidents were either executed or brutally tortured and issued long-term prison sentences. In the same period, many young girls were raped and then executed.
بازجوها دفاع میکردن، توابا دفاع میکردن. مثلا اینی که معلومه وقتی که بخواین مثلا بازجوی خود من گفت یا به عنوان یه مارکسیست، شب اول به من گفت وای میسی سر موزه دفاع میکنی و بلافاصله اعدام میشی یا اینکه آدم میشی تواب میشی. لحن تهدید داشت دیگه که مثلا تو حالا فقط مرگ که نیست مثلا بمیری. قبل از اعدام که دختران باکره به عقد برادر پاسدار، یه برادر پاسدار رو تجاوز اصلا حرف نمیزدن، اینا میگفتن عقد. که من یادم ما بحث میکردیم با تباهم، گفتم یعنی چی عقد؟ عقد یعنی اینکه تو بری بگی من تو رو دوست دارم، تو منو دوست داری، با هم ازدواج میکنیم. یعنی چی عقد؟ گفت نه این قانونیه، اون به چیز نمیکنه، به عقد در میاد، محرم میشه، نه فلان میشه. این توابع دفاع میکرد از این. مثلا من تعجب میکنم بعد مثلا میشنیدم بعد از زندان یا خارج زندان که مثلا کسی خبر نداره، به خاطر که هم کسی که جرمو داره مرتکب میشه ازش دفاع میکنه، هم توابی که داره اون رو برای من از نظر ایدئولوژیک و چی میگه از نظر چیز داره برای من مثلا باز میکنه که این مثلا جنایت نیست، این مثلا تجاوز نیست، این عقده.
اون موقع رئیس زندان بود، اسمش بعدها به بازجو تبدیل شد، سربازجو شد و بعد رئیس اطلاعات استان گیلان شده بود به اسم حسین عابدین. کتبی نوشتیم بهش دادیم که دختران باکره رو اعدام نمی کنیم ما، در حالی که مثلا دختران باکره هم اعدام میشن. که بعد اون جواب داد که مثلا جواب داد که نه، ما دختران باکره رو درست شنیدید، شما دختران باکره رو اعدام نمی کنیم. قبل از اعدام کسی که بخواد اعدام بشه قبل از اعدام باید حتما ازدواج بکنه و بعد به عقد برادری در بیاد.
Eventually, in the summer of 1988, Khomeini's regime was faced with deadlock in the 8-year-old war and hurt by many setbacks and losses, prepared to accept a ceasefire.
After 8 years and 800,000 deaths, Rafsanjani judged that the West's continued support for Saddam Hussein made it impossible for Iran to defeat him. He had to devise a way to make Khomeini accept the need for a ceasefire.
خوشا به حال جانبازان و اسرا و مفقودین و خانواده های معظم شهدا و بدا به حال من که هنوز ماندم و جام زهرآلود قبول قطعنامه را سر کشیدم.
Less than a year later, Khomeini was taken to hospital with stomach cancer. At his bedside, he regularly received Iran's president, Ali Khamenei, and Rafsanjani. With their help, he continued to rule the country.
Khomeini announced the acceptance of the ceasefire on July 20th, 1988, but a few days later issued an order to execute thousands of members of the People's Mujahideen Group, MEK. Committees composed of prison directors, judiciary and intelligence ministry officials, later known as death commissions, carried out mass executions of unrepentant MEK members.
میدونید که بسیاری از اعدام شده ها حکم زندان داشتن. عده‌ایشون حتی چند ماه و چند هفته مونده بود که دوره زندانشون تموم بشه و آزاد بشن. بسیارشون بچهای زیر 18 ساله بودن. اعضای اصلی هیئت مرگ که مخاطب آیت الله منتظری ان تو اون جلسه که فایل صوتیش منتشر شده اینها بودن: حسین علی نیری، منسوب آیت الله خمینی به عنوان حاکم شرع، رئیس هیئت مرگ در سال 67. امروز معاون دیوان عالی کشور و رئیس دادگاه انتظامی قضات. مرتضی اشراقی، دادستان انقلاب اسلامی تهران در سال 67. امروز نامعلوم. مصطفی پور محمدی، نماینده وزارت اطلاعات در هیئت مرگ در سال 67. امروز وزیر دادگستری دولت حسن روحانی. ابراهیم رئیسی، معاون دادستان تهران در سال 67. امروز عضو هیئت رئیسه مجلس خبرگان رهبری، متولی آستان قدس رضوی.
This large-scale massacre was so horrific that Ayatollah Montazeri, the then-designated successor to Khomeini, recent records reveal, vocally protested it. This led to his dismissal from the line of succession.
به نظر من بزرگترین جنایت به جمهوری اسلامی شده و در تاریخ ما رو محکوم میکنه به دست شما انجام شده و شما رو در آینده جزء جنایتکاران تو تاریخ می‌نویسن.
While MEK members were being executed, a new order for the execution of leftist prisoners were issued by Khomeini, which resulted in the murder of thousands in unmarked mass graves in places such as Khavaran. The horrific mass murder of prisoners during the summer of 1988 and its iconic Khavaran cemetery is today recognized as crimes against humanity. The killing, kidnapping, disappearance, and torture of dissident intellectuals and artists continued long after the cleansing of prisoners in the 1980s and intensified under the presidencies of so-called moderate and reformists such as Rafsanjani and Khatami. However, Iranian people never gave up and came out to the streets by the millions to oppose the regime and its dictatorship following the fraudulent elections of 2009. They poured into the streets opposing the Islamic Republic dictatorship and called for an Iranian republic. But the regime brutally suppressed protests and through torture, killings, and intimidation of ordinary citizens fortified its control. The symbol of this period was the notorious Karizak prison of the Islamic judicial system judge Said Mortazavi, who was later promoted by the regime for his criminal services. Years, the assault on the basic human and civil rights of religious minorities such as Baha'is, Christians, Sunnis, Jews, and Sufis has continued unabated. Currently faced with several severe crises, the Islamic regime is on the brink of implosion and collapse. Iranian people suffering from enormous government corruption, poverty, discrimination, inflation, unemployment, and oppression have poured into the streets of many cities several times during this year. So far, these mass demonstrations and women's rights protesters have been brutally suppressed and pushed back temporarily. Human rights lawyers like Nazreen Sotoudeh and Abdul Fattah Soltani and many others have been jailed recently, and 3 young Kurdish political prisoners have been executed. But the floodgate has opened now, and the Islamic regime's days are numbered. People are openly calling the down of the entire system louder and clearer than before. Change is inevitable and imminent.
Protesters in Iran have been chanting against the religious and political elite. But for these men and women, what they say is the government's mishandling of the economy is their main grievance. This unidentified woman removed her headscarf, an increasingly common way for Iranian women to protest, and began addressing others.
Let's build our country with our own hands. People, do not be afraid. If we stand together and united, neither internal or external powers can confront us. We are Iranians. It is not our business what is happening in Palestine, Syria, Iraq, or Lebanon. Why should all our resources go to them?
Social media messages suggest she was arrested.